Welcome to the Catching Out, where this definitely isn't the second time we're doing this. I'm a great host, I'll tell you now, because we didn't definitely get through this podcast halfway through and then realised I hadn't clicked record.
Your hosting spectacular. Your producer needs a bit of work.
Oh man, just like the dreams of being able to like get paid for doing this and then pay a producer to do all the OBS crap. Like, that would be the goals.
Subscribe to the Patreon.
Yeah. Coming soon, TM. No, welcome to Catching Out. If you haven't listened to us before, where have you been? But welcome anyway. I am joined by my co-hosts Zoe and Colm. I'm not going to give them the biggest introduction, but yeah, Zoe plays internationally for Switzerland. Colm used to play internationally for Ireland. And yes, we'll go straight into it. If you haven't seen already, there will be other podcast episodes in your timeline. We are covering all of European dodgeball and reviewing it. And it is a slog because there is so much to talk about because it was such a big event. But yeah, let's go straight into it. This is the women's portion. Women's portion of you. Yeah, slog. The slog was the right word. Women's portion of the European Dodgeball Championship. Right, starting again. For our audio listeners, Pool A, Sweden topped out the group, undefeated. Second, Czechia. Third, Switzerland. Fourth, Croatia. Fifth, Spain. In Pool B, Austria topped the group, undefeated, with Netherlands claiming the second quarterfinal spot, and Scotland third, and Belgium fourth. In Pool C, England undefeated at the top, with a three-way tie between Wales, France and Hungary, with Wales ending up on top to claim that quarterfinal spot, with France and Hungary finishing third and fourth respectively. Pool D, Italy with 5 points topping the group, Northern Ireland on 4 coming second, Republic of Ireland coming third with 3 points, and Norway finishing off at the bottom of that group. So, Pool A, what did we say about Pool A last time? Sweden, good. Croatia, improved. Switzerland, getting there. Hope for the future. Right? Done? Yeah?
No. You have to read it. We've already done it once. Doesn't mean we can skip it through.
Cool, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, Sweden, like... Actually, I don't know why I'm talking. Shall we go to Zoe? You give us the initial thoughts. You give us the initial thoughts like you did last time.
I can reuse all of the same jokes. Fucking hell. Yeah. I think basically the crux of this group is that it kind of looked like it should have been a really easy group going into it, but when you look at the final outcomes, Sweden and Czechia coming 4th and 5th, Switzerland coming 10th, and I actually can't remember off the top of my head where Croatia and Spain came, but those top three, despite the fact that there's not like a stand like above, head and above everyone else type first place team. The second, like the other teams in there are all like very, very high quality. So you kind of look at that and the fact that like Czechia, for example, the second place team in Pool A came higher than the Netherlands and Northern Ireland in the final table. So like, there's no one team that was always going to be better than everyone else, but that doesn't mean it was an easier group. I think Sweden kind of got off on the wrong foot. We watched them in the Croatia-Sweden match, and Croatia were, I'm pretty sure, up at halftime, which was a surprise to everyone, and that's a huge kudos to Croatia there. Sweden just looked completely frazzled and just weren't playing as a team. They were just kind of lost as to what to do and seemed on the back foot the whole time. And then that was the only time that happened in the entire tournament. So thank you, Sweden, for getting your shit together before playing Switzerland. I'm really grateful for that. That was really nice of you guys to do that. So yeah, they kind of got their act together. And Croatia, like, I don't think we should diminish the fact that they beat Spain. They played very, very well against Sweden, like I just said. And in general, we're actually like a lot stronger than I think people would have given them credit for before the tournament, myself included. They're just a very, very good team. And I think watching that Sweden match, the thing that seemed to get them down was just the length of the games, that like Sweden in the second half seemed to have so much more energy in their play and like could move around. They had more subs. They could kind of like keep their momentum up high, whereas there were moments when like a frame would end and the Croatians just looked knackered on court. So I think that's one of those things where it's like that's a very easy fix. They've got a year now until the next until World Champs and until sort of all the regional Euros. So if they just start training frequently for dodgeball, then they'll be an incredibly strong team in future events. They've got the tactical side of it down. They've got the actual like ability down as long as they're still fresh. So yeah, lots of good things to see there with Croatia. Switzerland, I think what I said last time was basically just that we went down about 3 sets at the start of every single game, and that's not how you want to be playing in this kind of format. We were lucky that the games were so long, so we could kind of claw back, but it's that kind of sets you up in a difficult headspace for the game, and I think that's what Switzerland's going to be looking at. But at the same time, I would say that Swiss team played better than I've ever seen a Swiss women's team play. It was, really good, really fluid dodgeball a lot of the time. It just took 3 sets for us to hit the moment where it was becoming fluid. There sort of seemed to be like a confidence issue, especially in the Sweden game, where I think everyone was just scared, and it just kind of, it's one of those interesting things where I think once you get rid of those little things that are holding on, then that middle of the table section from 4th down to 13th is probably going to be very, very close in the next few Euros. Just like it already was pretty close this Euros, but the things that are kind of keeping the people in the lower levels of that table from progressing higher aren't fundamental issues, I would say. They're not skill issues that are massively different. It seems to be just sort of little things that you could very easily tweak over the course of a year. And so it will be really interesting for future Euros. I'd imagine it's going to, the table's going to tighten, essentially, as it were. And just become really, really close in that middle bit. So very exciting pool. Very fun. Very much enjoyed it. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you for coming to Zoe's TED Talk. It was definitely an interesting pool to be there and watch. I think what I said last time was that that day one impact that Croatia had on all of their groups, whether it was men's, mixed, or women's, they came out firing. It was their Euros, their home Euros. So they really came out to play and surprised a lot of teams. So it's not really a surprise that they took on Sweden in the way that they did with the women's, and also to get a win in your. I'm not sure if it is their first, but I think their first time as a team at Euros.
They had a women's team, I think, in 2019, but they didn't last Euros. I don't know.
Okay. But either way, very impressive, really well done, and you can see that they've got some really good leaders on that team that really helped, especially given it was the first Euros, I imagine, for some of those players, build the confidence of the team. They really didn't feel like they were out of their depths at all. They took every challenge head on, and they full on went for it. And yeah, their wingers were incredible to watch. They played very well, really good on the running counters and punishing game. And yeah, Sweden, fair play. Like, it's going to be interesting to see how they do in the coming year. Obviously, everyone got better in the last year, but Sweden did really well last year as well. They've got better this year, and I think they look like a proper outfit, proper tactically set up, really looking for taking on each game one game at a time, even when it gets to the knockouts, looking at trying to pick apart their opponents and find that route to the win. And it really showed in the knockout games with how close some of those matches got. Really showed how tactically they were there for a lot of those games. Especially with teams that have been around for quite a while, like Italy. But yeah, really impressive from them. And then Czechia, I mean, just like absolutely sound. Fifth all round for them. Like, yeah, really impressive team.
Remember when Czechia ranked this year? It's so much fun. I'm really glad that they everywhere.
What are you? We're 5.
It just means it makes you sound so impressive that you can just remember what ranking they had until you realise it's because they had it in every single category. It's really easy.
So nice. So yeah, well done to them. But yeah, Pool B. Unless you had any thoughts, Colin. No, there's nothing. Those eyes are dead. There's nothing behind there.
Zoe pretty much added all of everything I said the first time round into her speech.
I'm sorry. first time, and I replied to them the first time.
Yeah. No, that's you. Like moved on from your original point, added mine, then went on to your response to what I said the first time, right? So it's all good. It's all. No, I think the only thing missed out. So you're talking about like Switzerland going 3 sets down. For me, I don't think it was necessarily a mental thing. It looked like more of a slow to adapt to the opposition. And I thought whenever you did adapt, you actually played really, really well, and you showed that there's definitely a core squad there that has the ability to go higher in the ranks in future tournaments. So yeah, it'll be exciting to watch. And personally, for me, I think Czechia played the best actual dodgeball, and it was just unfortunate moments, especially in the Sweden game, that kind of stopped them. And I think if they had come first, I actually would have been really interested to see how they would have done, like overall, because I think they probably would have got through the quarterfinalists into the semis, and I think that would have been the big boost that they needed. Because I think with what happened, like in the quarterfinals, is why they didn't do as well as they probably would have liked. Because the fact that they came fifth showed that there's a strong squad there, a very strong squad there. So it'll be exciting to see what happens in the future.
Yeah, if I remember that, like Czechia were up in that game to begin with, or it was like very close up till half time.
In Sweden?
Against Sweden. It was a really
it was very close the entire time. It was like it's 7-all half time, and then it was like 13-11.
I was going to say Sweden. 2 sets difference at the end normally shows that like you were close right up until you realized you had to win the next set, and then you lost the next set, and then you pushed to win a final set and you lost that one.
The big set was one of the last 2 that drew, and that was the big set that secured it for Sweden, basically.
Cool. On to Pool B.
Oh my god, Austria came first. Whoa.
Okay, like before we like go on
crazy
and say what the hell was that?
Have you ever watched Hawkeye? That's from Hawkeye. No, am I the only Marvel nerd here? Okay,
that was such
somebody would appreciate that reference.
That's like a 2-year-old reference though. Like that's old now.
I'm okay with it.
And that was the last time Colin was relevant.
I was relevant? What?
Yeah, 2 years ago before we started this podcast. Yeah, that was the downfall.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so Austria had some really great teams in their group. Netherlands, Scotland, historically as well. Had to come away with set difference, which is double any other team's set difference in apart from Northern Ireland. We ignore Northern Ireland and Sweden. Yeah, okay, I'll shut up. That was bad. Austria good. Moving on. Nick can't do maths.
Oh no, the recording's not working again.
Oh no, we need to start again. I want to say, oh wait, it's a recording. We're not live. I wonder if I can edit this. But yeah, no. So
constantly for the next 5 minutes.
Pool B, yeah, Austria. Yeah, just going into Austria. Austria's so good. Yeah, no.
Some they did twice as well as any other team, really.
Yeah, I'm not getting away with that one. Yeah, I'll shut up. Yeah, go on then. Pool B.
Pool B. Yeah, Austria did well. Scotland, what I said the last time we tried to record this, was Scotland historically. I really like your use of the word historically there. It's a nice way of lessening the blow. It's like, oh, they used to be good. No, they were historically very good. They're a good team. They've got some really good players. The problem with the Scotland team is that they have certain players that are incredibly good. And that's great because then you use them in mixed and you have a very strong mixed team. The downside to that is if you do that, you tend to have tired players when you get into the women's. So it's that element of like, do you want to have a very, very well competing women's team or a very well competing mixed team? Or do you have enough depth within your squad to kind of do both? And I don't think Scotland had the depth to do both, and they weren't willing to sacrifice mixed the same way that like Italy did or Switzerland did, where they kind of use it as a development area. So instead, you had a situation which the best players in Scotland were tired from their mixed games and were also still playing in like very critical roles on court. These were their wingers that were knackered from other games a lot of the time. So that's quite tricky. I think that kind of ended up being the sacrifice that they made. I think it's fair enough when you make a sacrifice like that you kind of have to accept that you're probably not going to get out of the groups in the women's game. It would be quite tricky. Some teams obviously manage to do it. England manages to do it, but you have to have that depth. You have to have a huge rotation available, and they just didn't really rotate them. I think even Scottish coaches would agree with that. I'm sure Ross will let me know. But yeah, it's
nice.
Hi Ross. But yeah, Scotland versus Netherlands 18-10 as a scoreline. So not super far apart, but that's not a super close scoreline either. And I don't think it's surprising really to see Scotland not progress through. I think it's surprising. It would have been surprising if they hadn't progressed in any of the groups, but the fact they didn't progress in women's is fair enough considering the gamble that they made. And I think it was the correct gamble to make, to be honest. So yeah. And their overall ranking in the table at the end of the whole tournament kind of agrees with that. Are they the worst placed? No, Ireland. I was going to say, are they the worst placed?
I thought you were just going to stop on, are they the worst?
Are they the worst? No.
I was like, whoa.
They suck.
I was going to say, are they the worst?
That's getting clipped up.
I think Ireland placed lower than them, didn't they, in the final table? But
yeah,
they're the third place team if you look at like the overall table rankings. So, it's not as if it's a massive like shame that they didn't get through and it's a horrible mischance. It's I think it reflects the correct thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, they got some work to do, definitely, for sure. I feel like we should praise Netherlands for coming second in that group. They still need to do your job to get through. I think that Scotland-Netherlands game, I think now, yes, admittedly we are in 20-minute halves now, but I'm pretty sure it was still a bigger win this time than last time they met, because they were in the same group last time. So I think it was a 1-set or 2-set win last time, not a 3-set. So yeah, good to see Netherlands growing, getting stronger. Yeah. And adding new players that have kit that Zoe wants. Zoe's very happy about that.
Still incredible that happened. Yeah.
There was a printing error with the Dutch kit, so they didn't get the names on their backs, but they all wanted the names on their backs, so they just manually put them on.
No way.
Yeah, that's why they're really small.
Because it's underneath the number, isn't it? It's like
yeah.
It's definitely the wrong way round. I did see. Yeah. Okay.
But they
it's really small
themselves.
really small.
I want people in general.
No, you're just really small.
I'm 5'7".
Under half.
Moving on. Pussy. England being undefeated. We did see that we thought there might be some sort of, like say rock, paper, scissors between England, Wales and France, but it ended up being Wales, France and Hungary.
On my line, Nick.
Yeah, well, that's going to happen a lot now that we're re-recording it.
Sorry, we're nearly at where we were before.
I think we're, just to avoid some of the comments around what some people might say about Hungary and the, issues around coaching, but they played really, really well. Yeah, I'm not stealing anyone's line here, am I, Zoe? Word for word. No, go on, Zoe. You say your point. You know the points better than I do. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think kudos to England, because like we said, we thought that England might be stuck in this weird little loop with Wales and France, and instead they were clear out of it, and they won all their games. I don't think they felt particularly threatened. The closest match they had was against Hungary, and I think that's huge for Hungary. Hungary were really, really impressive this time around. All of their matches were really, really good. I wouldn't have expected them to do as well as they did, and it kind of feels a little bit of an injustice that they came fourth in the table, considering that they beat Wales 16-4 and they
16-14. Yeah, I was gonna say
16-4.
Right.
Damn.
And then what they got 18-10. Well, they lost 18-10 against England, but that's an impressive scoreline against England. And
I think there was only one set in it at half time as well, because England did exactly what Wales did against Hungary. It's like they didn't learn. They definitely put their B team out against Hungary, and Hungary were like, yeah, thanks very much, we'll take this on. And we're very much going toe to toe with it. And then at half time, England were like, oh yeah, we should probably actually handle this fucking situation. And they did, which, fair enough, they did. And Wales couldn't, because the difference in squad depth between England and Wales is quite significant. So yeah, that had a massive part to play.
All I was going to say on Hungary is just that, like, I think the individual ability on that team is so much higher than we've seen it before. They've improved individually as players really well.
100%.
I think the thing that's holding them back at the moment is coaching and certain like tactical decisions from the coaching box rather than from the players themselves on court. And I think that's something that it would be interesting to see that improve over time. But the actual players themselves, I thought, massively improved since previously, and that shows that they've got the potential to go really, really far in the tournament. In future events, because all you have to do is get sort of sort out that one little issue, and you're suddenly beating Wales by even more than a set, or beating Wales in a way that matters. When they beat Wales and Wales still came second, it's like, well, that feels a bit harsh, doesn't it? Hungary shouldn't have been knocked out necessarily, but that's how it works. That's how things happen if you lose against France. So.
Just to summarise on why that happens. So. In the EDF rules, again, we've covered this in other podcasts, but in EDF rules, if there is a three-way tie, it comes down to the matches and set difference between each team, not the set difference necessarily you're seeing on the screen here. So what that means is usually you get a three-way tie, or previously you got a three-way tie between the top teams, and then new teams were the teams that got the brunt of the force of, right, set different matters. We need to, beat this team heavily to be able to progress, which is not fair on the team that's just come in. So, I think it is a much fairer way to do it and a much better way to do it. It does mean in this case that actually it wasn't about the new team, being beat up on. This was very much on lose by the least amount to England, but it didn't really matter. Which it came down to the Wales, France, and Hungary game. So, yeah, I think
lose a lot.
Yeah. But yeah, that Wales, France, and Hungary sort of thing, I feel like because of the way that goes, it means that, especially on that first day, some teams definitely got the memo of you've got to come out firing because every match matters. You can't have one game to warm up because by the end of the first day, you can very easily see yourself in a hole that you've somehow got to dig yourself out on in the second day, which if the fixtures aren't in your favour, you've kind of already dug your grave. Which, ironically, France didn't. France were the other way around. They had the opportunity on the second day and they didn't take it. So, yeah, definitely a note to all. First day, focus, and don't mess around. Get your wins where you need them. Make Friday easier.
Wales. I think Wales may have underestimated Hungary going into that match, but I do think it was more an element of just it's the way that you react once you've worked out that they're better than you think they're going to be is the defining feature there. That, like, fine enough to be surprised, you can go down by 3 sets, as already discussed, and still win a game. But if your reaction to a team being better than you expected them to be, or winning more sets than you expected them to, is to suddenly just be like, what the fuck are we meant to do? Jesus Christ, we're going to lose this match, and just kind of freak out a little bit, then you're not going to win the game. You just have to kind of settle your head and push back properly. And I think Wales lost their heads because they really weren't expecting it. And I think there were obviously some situational elements as well that were impeding that. But regardless, you have to be able to just settle your head and deal with the situation in front of you. You can't argue those things in that moment. You have to argue them later. Obviously.
Yeah, I massively agree with that. I think
certain cards.
Moving on. I just to give France a bit of credit, they just walked into every game and tried to play their style. I felt like they failed to adapt against Wales whenever they realized it wasn't working, and that's what cost them there. But they went to the Hungary game, played their game, and absolutely battered them. They didn't let anything that happened previously affect their mindset going into the game. They played really, really well there, and they've shown that. I think it's the experience that was lacking and the kind of mentality in the game to go, shit, this is how I'm going out a lot. What do I need to change? That didn't really show in the game against Wales because it seemed to be the same kind of ways going out on repeat for pretty much every single player that was on court. So if they're able to kind of adapt quicker, you could see them doing quite well in the next tournament. I reckon there's a strong future squad there for sure.
I definitely felt like it was a bit of a different squad to last year. Like, I could be wrong, but I feel like there were some new
I've no
faces,
idea.
like two or three.
No.
Like the core was still there, but I still felt like there was 2 or 3 new people.
It wasn't that different to the previous squad, but I think the biggest difference was that people knew how to play them. Is what I said in the predictions before.
Yeah, you did.
Was that like this is a team that we now recognize, and so you can go into that match knowing how they might play because you actually have match footage to watch, and they're not that experienced at the end of the day. So you can be pretty confident going into that match that they've probably not developed a particularly different play style in the last year. Whereas like Wales have been around for donkey's years, and so you can watch last year's footage of some of their matches, but that doesn't mean that's how they're going to play now. They might change up how they're playing against you. Whereas France is pretty much stuck in, they know one thing that works for them, they know one style of dodgeball, and if it doesn't work, they're a little bit screwed. The good news is it works a lot of the time, but
they were very glass cannon. Like if you got certain players out on that team, they crumbled quickly.
And
Yeah,
again,
fair.
it comes down to experience that partly, where it's, you know, when you've got mentality issues like that, where you can't really, once you start losing, then maybe it's to do with experience. I say that. I did just say that Wales had the same issue against Hungary, and Wales have tons of experience. So, but France kind of seemed to occasionally let their heads drop quite badly. I think it was one of the most notable things when they beat us in the 9th, 10th playoff. They didn't seem to be happy at all. Like, Switzerland were cheering, even though we just lost the game, and France seemed on the border of tears, even though they just won a game. You know, like, they just, because it's not where they wanted to be. They don't want to be in a 9th, 10th playoff, so they just didn't care. And it's like, I mean, it sucks that you were in that situation, but, you know, take every game as you get it and try and play the best you can with your situation and enjoy it as well. It just kind of seemed a bit like they got frustrated at times and they weren't winning as easily as they did last year, essentially, is the thing. That what had worked before wasn't working for them, and that's frustrating when you think that it's your kind of ability that made you win last year. It was their ability, but it was the fact their ability was unknown that made them win it last year. The good news is, now that they've had this year, I reckon next time round, they'll have worked out, okay, we need to have different strategies. And this will have really shown them that you can't just have one strategy. You have to go in with a lot of different strategies. You have to know how to rotate. You have to play kind of the way that Austria's always played, where you have the ability to just switch up constantly on court at a minute's notice. And like France at the moment this year didn't have that. But now that they've really been shown that they have to have that, it doesn't matter if they're decided before this Euros that they needed to train that. It would have been lovely, but they probably wouldn't have quite got it in their heads because they're just used to winning. Whereas now they've had the opportunity of losing quite badly in situations where they expected to do better. And I think that might just kind of show them that it's important to train those elements.
Yeah, so your opinion of France is like a Newton's cradle. It just swings one way and then the other, then one way to the other, depending on
But I'm right. And that's the important thing.
Yeah, sure, moving on. Pool D. So, I guess the one game I want to talk about is Italy versus the Republic of Ireland, because what a game that was. 16-all was the final score, and I'm pretty sure it was 12-0 at half-time to the Republic of Ireland. There are two things about that game that like completely amazed me. One is that the Republic of Ireland were 12-0 up against Italy at half-time. That was the big like headline. Like, damn, okay, impressive. The other side of it is how the fuck Italy then came back like without dropping too many sets to get that draw. Like going in after half-time knowing that like, okay, you've dropped 12 sets, you need to go back, you need to come in absolutely swinging, and you have to be near faultless to be able to stand a chance of getting a draw, let alone a win. And they did it. They did what they needed to do, which is incredible. Tactically watching it, the difference that I saw between the first half and the second half was the Irish women's team, their wingers were basically free to do whatever they wanted in the first half. A lot of the targeting, the multi-ball targeting, the single ball targeting was off the wingers, and I don't know whether it's just how Ireland play or it was a pre-made decision, but they were already like 2-3 steps up the court against Italy at this point, and they have the arms to be able to just, you know, chase them down, hit Italy, and know that Italy can't catch them at that point, because Italy are catching insane. Like if you've not watched Italy women's, they catch pretty much everything, whether it's on the body or somewhere over there. They can like catch something at arm's length. They are insane players. But when you've got a running counter on you and you're tracking backwards, it makes it that little bit harder that Ireland were able to capitalise on it and regularly. And it took them till half time to figure out, we need to start pinning these wingers back so that they can't do that to us, so we can keep our players in and we can make the catches and force Ireland to hit them on the set plays rather than on running counters. And that's what made the difference. But even then, that forces Italy to sit back and wait for Ireland to make the mistakes and then still get all those sets. Just so impressive, like crazy game to watch. Really, really fun to watch. That was my
well, you pretty much sums up very well. One thing I will say in terms of the Irish women is that that's a major improvement compared to the past couple of tournaments for them. And the new faces they brought in done a really good job. And now they just need to build on that. As you said, that they found a way that works for them, and it's now going right. We've now got good chemistry. We've got a good core. We know what works, but now we also know what doesn't. What do we need to improve on and add to the arsenal to be able to change our own game to, in situations like against Italy, go right. We have this big lead. How do we hold on to it? They're changing it. They're adapting to what we've done. Now, how do we just kill this game off and just try and pick off the odd set here or there? Like, that's what they need to do next, is being able to see out the games. And they'll it'll just be through, practice and experience as a squad. But overall, it is a good start, and they played a lot better than I was initially expecting whenever we were doing our preview episode. Like, if you had told me that they were even 3 or 4 sets up against Italy at one point.
Wait, just hold a second. Are you praising the Irish team?
Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't
Sorry, okay.
Don't be that guy.
Nick, you said just hold up, and my heart
I thought it was the recording. Yeah, I was leaving the call, mate. If I was.
Oh yeah, sorry guys, not been recording again.
PTSD. No, like there's a good core there. Like, there's still a long way to go. Don't get me wrong. Like, and it showed against Northern Ireland especially. Like, and whenever you're playing against a squad that knows the individual players as well as they would have, they got punished for it, quite badly in the end, to be honest. But if I was the Irish women's team, like, you take the positives away, you know what you've got to work on, and you just have to keep on improving. And if they can bring in a couple of more experienced players as well, like, they'll be flying the next tournament.
Yeah, definitely. And Italy definitely seemed to like playing from behind. I maybe not like, but they were good at it because they beat Northern Ireland from doing that. They were down at half time, I believe, and they managed to claw it back for a win against them. Just, yeah, impressive from Italy all the way through, to be honest.
Yeah.
And Norway, just want to say, Norway joining the club. From what I saw of them, they were still very well structured. They knew what they were doing. They still had some fundamentals that were there. Like, they had the group call in. They were playing, targeting well and things like that. It's just getting the experience of understanding what other teams are doing, what works well, what doesn't work, and I'm sure we'll see them become very competitive pretty quickly, because they had some talent on that team, and for sure that can definitely cause some problems in a few more Euros time.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they do in their regional Euros. I think that'll be a real sign of, like, once you've had your first Euros out the way and you've worked out, okay, this is what it's like at that level, that's the high level. You kind of go back to the drawing board, and you start actually developing your tactics properly and taking it kind of in a different light to how you did before. And so you tend to see quite a big jump. And I think it'll be useful to have regional Euros before their next major tournament, so World Champs, because then for them, and it's a home Euros for them as well, that means that they can kind of test what they've worked out, what they think might work ahead of World Champs. And so that gives them a really good footing going into World Champs, where, like, they might get a pretty decent improvement between Euros and World Champs, just because they'll have the opportunity to develop tactics as well as practice them in a kind of gentler system, which is what regional Euros is. It's a nicer way of, it's a nice, easier Euros. Still difficult, but
Yeah, but it's not 4 days long.
it's not 4 days long, and you don't have all of the horrible nations that will beat you into a pulp if you play them. So you only get like one
I mean,
or two.
you definitely do. Like, you do have some of those nations.
You always get at least one in each
Yes.
region. You're not going to be in a situation where you're playing against England as well as Austria as well as Italy. Like, obviously they don't play against all those teams here, but like playing against those same teams, they're not going to have to like play against Italy again, for example.
For sure, for sure. Any other thoughts before we move on to?
No.
No. Cool.
Not right now. I'll save some of the NI chat for quarters.
Yeah.
Hey, looks like nothing wrong happened at all.
Power of editing.
Through the magic of editing, we're back. I'll probably just leave that in, just for the lols. Just be death silence for all the audience listeners. But yeah,
That's how you keep retention.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I can't really remember how we went through the predictions for the men's groups. But let's try and go through by quarter final. For our video watchers or YouTube watchers, you will see on the screen what we all predicted, left to right, myself, Zoe, and Colm. And then to the right of that, you see what the actual result was in terms of who got to that position and then who ended up winning. So, for example, in the first quarterfinal, I predicted Sweden would top Group A and Netherlands would become second in Group B, and they would play off. And then Zoe predicted Czechia to finish top of Group A, and so did Colm. And then in Group B, Scotland to come second from Zoe.
I don't know why I said that.
Netherlands to come second. So yeah, I was the only person who got that right with Sweden versus Netherlands. However, I did get my prediction wrong. I thought Netherlands were going to beat Sweden, but Sweden beat Netherlands. And I was there for that game, and it was an incredible game. It came down to the last 90-second set. It was a fantastic game to watch. It was so nervy. The adrenaline through all that game was insane. And yeah, it came down to that 90-second set. And I think Sweden were up, and I think it finished in a draw. I can't remember. Or Sweden won that set. But I do know it came down to a last-second suicide attempt, and whether or not the ball was thrown, whether the hit was made before or after the whistle went, but it went as the player was in the air. It's a heartbreak for Netherlands, because they made the hit as well. They made the hit on the Swedish player, and just, yeah. Absolute drama in a quarterfinal. What we love to see, unless you're Dutch, because that's heartbreaking. That was really heartbreaking.
Drive it in there. Go on.
I'm not gonna lie. I
would
was
just start calling like the individual players that lost, or it was a very good game, and Netherlands adapted against, because Sweden were changing up their play styles. They knew when to grind out the sets. They knew when to go aggressive. They had both fairly well disciplined in their locker. I thought Netherlands done really well to kind of adapt to the situations. I do think there was times where they went unnecessarily aggressive, and Sweden really punished them for it, and that's probably what cost them in the early sets. But yeah, I think it was a very, very good game to watch. I would definitely recommend that's one of the games that you have to go back and look at.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Sweden felt a tad more organised for it. Like we were saying before, in terms of like they have that organisation around them now, that team and that squad, where they are really looking at games, they're adapting, and they're looking ahead at games on how to best put their team in the best position to win. And it definitely felt like that against the Netherlands. The Netherlands is so well, like they for it to come down to that shows you how talented that team are and how able they are to really surprise everyone and also win the sets that they need to. But I think the fact that Sweden won that is testament to the organisation around them and how well that team reacted to what they were being told to do, and how how focused they were to just get the job done, and in that final 90-second set, holding on, knowing that they needed to win by basically a person. Yeah, cool. Right, that's quarterfinal done. But yeah, so Sweden went through to the semi-final there, and then in the next quarterfinal, we all predicted England to top Group C, and all predicted Northern Ireland to come second in Group D. I don't know whether or not people would have been surprised by that prediction, given that Northern Ireland came third in the women's last time. That, you know, Northern Ireland comes second in their group to Italy. I feel like that is a bit of a, I wouldn't say harsh prediction, but, you know, an odd prediction. But we were all right.
Yeah, so that makes it, by definition, not harsh. It was correct, I think.
It was correct. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah.
It was what I definitely to and froed on whenever I was making the prediction of Italy and NI. I thought it was the tightest, other than maybe Group A. I love the NI women and how they play, and I think they try to play a very similar style to their men and mixed teams. Like it is very much a similar play style across the board, and I think the decision making on the NI women's team is incredible. I just think they kind of play into the Italy like catching game a bit too much. And that's kind of what it came to in the end. I just think the Italians are extremely good catchers. And whenever you're like relying on a smart throwing game, like it's going to be a bit of a downfall. But there's I wouldn't have been shocked if NI beat Italy and it would have ended up a very different quarterfinal in the end. But to be honest, NI against England, I thought they did very well at the start of the game, especially, and England just adapted very well to the game, and NI couldn't change up enough to go back at them. But at the start of the game, I was watching it going, This is going to be a struggle. Obviously, it wasn't in the end. England won quite comfortably, but at the very start, I think NI like showed how well that their play style can do. They just need to take it up the next level.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where like the difference between the NI play style and the Italian play style is that I think what I said in the predictions episode is I'm scared of the Italians, whereas I'm not really scared of the NI lot. I feel like I know how they play. Whereas with the Italians, I do kind of know how they play, but they always just seem to do something where I'm just like, what, how, why did you do that? And why did that work? Like, what on earth is going on in your mind? I think that shows when you end up having a game between sort of NI and England, for example, where both of those teams know each other. They know how each other play. And, you know, the fact that I can tell you how I think NI would play in that match shows you that literally anyone in that England squad would be able to do the same. And so when you've got that kind of situation where two teams know each other exceedingly well and know each other's tactics, and they play somewhat predictably within those tactics as well, it comes down to one of them just is stronger. Like, it's just made up of stronger individuals at the end of the day. They're playing quite similar play styles, and England has better players. NI has very good players, to be clear. That's shown by the fact they got 9 points, but like England just has categorically better players. They've got far more better players than NI do.
I also think in the women's, especially, England's game management in terms of substitutions and how they changed up tactics during the game throughout the tournament was definitely a strong suit for them.
Yeah, I think like Northern Ireland as well, like given some of their players played for mixed as well, like that shows you how strong those players are with how well the Northern Ireland mixed team did. But yeah, it is that rest of the squad. You need that whole squad to do it. That shows you how strong those players are, and also how strong the rest of the team are, that they are still performing at that level, and you know they are getting through to the quarterfinals almost predictably, and doing really well at it. But they do need that like extra level to be able to, you know, compete with England. And I think against Italy as well, like it's something about that team. I don't know if you know more about it, Zoe, but the chemistry on that Italian team to like defend. Each player go up and know exactly what the other person is doing to cover them when they're baiting for a catch, and just, you know, the amount of times you saw people hitting people that were going that, you know, that had thrown a catch. Essentially, you saw it a lot in the England game against Austria in the final as well. But yeah, that Italian team, the way that they play like that is incredible, and I think Northern Ireland. Yeah, just there's not much you can do about that unless you're also doing that same kind of thing back to them. So yeah,
I think on that point, like, the reason why Italy have the ability to play that kind of game where they're defending each other very, very well is rooted in the fact that they're a catching team. They're an incredibly good set of catchers, which means any one of them isn't scared to put themselves higher up court, because regular people would be like, oh, I don't want to put myself high up court because what if I get hit? And Italian woman is like, I can put myself up court because maybe I'll get a catch. And it's just, you can see it because then they go up and they defend each other really well, because they're not putting themselves in danger in their minds in that situation. They're defending each other, but does the other player really need defense? And it's like, well, maybe they do, and let's give them that defense just in case they need it, but they'll probably also get the catch that they needed to get as well. So like, it's a really tricky thing to play against when you've got players that A, are very, very good catchers, but B, have utmost confidence in catching and have been coached in a way that allows them to back themselves up on those catches. Italian women go for catches that you wouldn't expect most people to go for. And that's a commentary on the way that they've been trained. That's, you know, a lot of teams will coach you out of going for unnecessary catches, and I don't really feel as if the Italians have a concept in their women's team of an unnecessary catch. Which is great. Like, it leads to some of the most exciting dodgeball you've ever seen. It's very different to how some of the other teams play.
It's a blessing and a curse. It's
a blessing and a curse. And it means sometimes they lose things where you really shouldn't be losing that match. But other times they are just, they pull things out their asses, basically. You watch them, you're like, how the hell did you manage that? That's insane. You shouldn't have been going for it, but my God, am I glad you did, because that was brilliant.
Yeah, it was.
But we're not talking about this.
We're not talking about this.
This as if it was Italy against Northern Ireland. This was England against Northern Ireland.
But that game had a huge impact on this one, because we were, you know, it was very much in that group dependent between on those two of how it kind of fell out on whether or not who would be playing England in this quarterfinal. But yeah, I think that about sums it up for that game. On to the next one, which was ended up being Czechia versus Austria, another one I got right. Where
Imagine not backing Zoe. Jesus Christ, Nick.
I do that. I do that.
Mine's
so
great.
frequently.
Mine's great. I actually don't actually know who I chose, but
you backed Sweden to come second. So yeah, Czechia versus Austria. I think it's kind of a tough one, because I don't think Czechia could really have expected this to go much better. It's the Austrian women's team. Like, I don't know how you step on court in a quarterfinal and go, yeah, we're playing the Austrian women's team, and this is going to be easy. Like, I don't think anyone can ever think that. Like, yeah, I don't know what else to say. Like, it's just such a tough game.
I think their heads were pretty much gone before the first whistle even blew, to be honest.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were focusing on their next match already by the time they were in that Austrian match. Like, that's how I would approach it. I'd be like, let's see how we can do. Let's play. Let's see how the first 3 or 4 sets go, because you never know. Maybe we'll just play something silly and we'll happen to do really well, which is pretty much what happened with Switzerland against England in the men's quarterfinals last year, where they went into that game. They're like, well, we're going to get absolutely shat on, so let's see what happens. And then they didn't, and that was really surprising. So, like, obviously, if you go up early, absolutely play that game seriously. But I think otherwise, it's fair game to just go into that one and be like, let's see what we can do. Let's practice playing as a good team, as a team together, and let's learn what we can from, frankly, some of the best dodgeballers in the world, and focus on our next game, because their next game
remind them that they can't do starts properly.
Yes.
That was funny. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that.
10 out of 10 comedy. Yeah, I think that was like quite late on in the match when they knew the match was completely gone.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
Yeah,
Would it be ballsy to do that as your first set?
The biggest mental game.
Yeah.
To be fair, I feel like Czechia could do something like that. Like I feel like Tamara would be like, why not? Like,
Why not?
like why not? You know. But yeah, it's a tough loss for Czechia in that one. But I mean, the last quarterfinal was again another ridiculously close one, another 15-13.
Wait, did you predict this one correctly, Nick? Did you get this one correct?
Yeah, Nick, let's talk about
I
predictions.
predicted the winner. Yeah, I predicted the winner of this
You didn't
game.
predict who was going to be playing, though, did you?
I didn't. I refused to listen to Zoe because Zoe knows all things about French dodgeball. All hail the great nerd of French dodgeball, Zoe Wells. Moving on.
Wales against Italy.
Yeah, Wales against Italy, which only Zoe got the prediction right of Wales playing Italy. I mean, to be fair, you're taking the piss out of me. Colin fucking backed France to win that game as well, so at least we knew how good the Italians were.
But yeah, that was a good match.
You're not taking yourself out of this whole bit.
Wait, it didn't record. Oh, no.
Posen changes his predictions.
Wait, be right back.
Delates the preview VOD.
I'll be honest, I didn't get to see this game and I haven't been able to watch it back, so I'm gonna have to take advice on.
Guys, let's move on.
Yep. GG's Wales F's in chat.
We love you.
Yeah.
I mean, we've already talked everyone's ear off about how fantastic the Italian women are, so I don't think we need to go over that one again. But ultimately, when you look at this match, it comes down to two teams that are very, very good at catching, playing against each other. But Italy, I would say, have the upper hand in catching, whereas Wales probably have the upper hand in throwing. And so with a game like that, it could genuinely go either way. It depends on what catches happen to happen. And a scoreline that close kind of demonstrates that. It just comes down to like pure random chance sometimes. And fair play to Italy for managing to get through there. I think Wales were glad to make it out of the groups and weren't expecting to make it out of the groups considering their performance in the groups. And so would have been pretty pleased with that performance against Italy. But ultimately, Italy is just a very, very good and very hard team to... It's hard to coach against Italy. It's very hard to know what they're going to do. So I think fair play to Wales for keeping it that close. But, massive game for Italy to win.
I did not expect Wales to make that game that close, like, considering how... Yeah. I say considering how the group stages went. Like, they underestimated Hungary and weren't able to climb out of the hole that they dug themselves. But they did really well against France, and they did really well against England. So maybe we should have seen them doing well.
Wales.
Yeah, I just wasn't expecting them to do that well against this Italy side. So fair play to them for really making a game of it and making it close all the way to the end. Because I'm pretty sure it came down to like the last set or so. It wasn't a case that Italy had comfortably won that game. I don't think.
I think, it's that reliability issue that Wales kind of has in all of their teams, I would say, where it's very hard to say how they're going to do in any match because they can pull out some incredible stuff and then they can also just absolutely trip over themselves. I don't know, it'll be interesting to see how the coaches manage that going forward because I think it was very, very obvious this time around. And that comes out of the fact that you're playing against teams that have been getting consistently better over time. And Wales have had certain players get better, and I'd say as a whole their players are better than they have been in some previous years, but their tactics and their team playing ability I wouldn't say is better than it has been previously. I'd say it's pretty much the same as it always has been, which isn't bad, but it isn't like amazing either. Sometimes you watch them and you're like, you're just playing an individual game right now. And so I think that's one of those elements where if you're playing more of an individual game or you've got 6 players playing 6 different tactical games on court, you can have a reliability issue because it comes down to whether or not individual players are playing well on the day, which always dodgeball is going to come down to that somewhat. Like, of course, player performance impacts the game. That's a dumb thing to act as if it doesn't. But the level that it
smart.
God, taunting coaching analysis right here.
That guy from Drive to Survive who's like, if you finish the race first, you win, and you're like, yeah, don't. No, obviously, like player performance impacts things, but like if you're playing 6 individuals on court, then it impacts things more than it would if you were just playing like 6 team players. So I think that's probably an area that Wales want to look into. But at the same time, kudos to them for managing to make a pretty big chunk of damage against Italy in that game, because
nearly make the semis.
One of us said it. Huh?
And nearly make the semis.
Yeah, no, that would have been huge for them. Almost getting knocked out in the groups, and then if they'd made it to the semis, that would have been an incredible story. But not actually what happened. So
we don't have a story. Moving on.
Well done.
Well done for nearly being interesting. That's way too harsh. I'm going to get ripped to shreds at League.
Deserving for that. Jesus Christ. Giving me shit about what I've said.
That's what we're here for, right? That's why people listen to us, for like ridiculously hot takes that are so wrong, and then roasting us later for it. Other than Zoe, because Zoe's always right.
No, I'm clearly not. Look at this fucking tape.
I was going to look up like who was the most accurate in the women's, but I can't find it at the moment. But yeah, so semi-finals, none of us predicted Sweden to get through to this round, but very deservedly so. What absolutely shocked me, that I've only just realised, is the symmetry of England beating Sweden 21-7 and Austria beating Italy 21-7. If that didn't set up the final and the third place playoff to be as hot a game as games as they were, like how close they both were, we probably should have seen it coming, having seen these results.
Yeah. Yep.
Leave that one on a cliffhanger. Because we know England are are insanely good. We know Austria are insanely good as well. But I guess with women's, like, prefacing this, before this, I always thought like Austria were a level above the rest. Then you have England, and then there's a bit of a cliff, and then there's sort of like everyone else together. I think like Northern Ireland are in that amalgamation. Italy are probably at the top of that group, because they're quite consistently up there now. But I still thought Austria were like significantly higher. So, with how England handled Sweden, I think this shows how far England have come in this year to go into this competition and handle their business in the way they did, learning from the mistakes they did against Hungary to be like, right, we need to sort this out, we need to sort it out quick, and they did, and they sorted out the game in a very fine manner, to then go into the playoffs and being able to adjust, not on the fly, but know who they're playing against, know the type of styles they're going to be playing against, and being able to play well enough against it to get quite a comfortable scoreline in both their quarterfinal and semi.
Yeah, I think it's what Colin was saying before, where like England just seemed to be very adaptable this year in a way that maybe we haven't necessarily seen them be in the past. And I think that's always the criticism that we've held against England, is that they sometimes fail to adapt in front of them, or not even necessarily fail to adapt, but they're slower to adapt, and just take like 2 sets to get into it, whereas Austria have historically only taken 1 set to get into each new style of play. I think looking at the team this year, that seems to be something that the coaches really instilled in them, that they had to become more adaptable players, and that if not necessarily being adaptable players, but also they had to be ready to come on from the outbox and be fresh and ready when they step on court. They can't have a warm-up set. They just have to be primed and playing fantastically from the moment they step on. And I think that really showed in their playing this year compared to previous years, that they just seem to be they seem to have like reached that level that has kind of eluded them in the past. And it never eluded them because of their individual playing capabilities. They're all very good players, and they've always been. England's always had very good players, but it's just that element of like training certain things and training certain game styles and certain game techniques that clearly they stepped up on in training. And yeah, they just seem to be a step above everyone else this year, other than Austria, where they were the tiniest step above. And Austria are great, so
yeah. We'll get onto that game in a minute. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about the Austria-Italy game, other than their warm-up routine together was absolutely incredible, and I think all teams should do that together, because that was so fun. Just walking in, being like, oh yeah, I need to take photos of this game, and just see everyone dancing to Cotton Eye Joe was quite a weird scenario to walk in on.
This is what Colin said about it.
Not what I was expecting you to say at all.
Yeah. No, they were just like in a big circle, like doing a full-on dance routine to it, and they, it was Italy and Austria, and this was their warm-up time. And instead of like throwing dodgeballs at each other, warming up, talking about tactics, how they're going to do the game, they just decided to dance, which fair enough. Interesting warm-up. But
is that going to replace like the Swedish the flute song that they always do?
Yeah.
Is that the new replacement for it? Cotton Eye Joe.
Yeah, maybe, but no, it was good. It was good to see, and they definitely, very, very. I wouldn't say a friendly game because it was very competitive, but you can see they both have like utmost respect for each other and how they play, and it was just good, really, really fun game to watch. Even if Austria did come up quite on top, quite comfortably, you can really see where Italy are and how far left they've got to go. It's a lot smaller than I think a lot of people thought before the beginning of the year. I think that gap is closing between England and Austria to the rest of the people, especially between Italy. I think Sweden still have a bit to go, but we'll see that one. We'll be watching that very closely at Worlds, I reckon. It'll be interesting to see how that happens and plays out.
And the finals. Sorry, actually, can we do the third, fourth playoff before we do the finals?
I was going to go to the finals because then we've got the placement, and then we can go to the third, fourth, and the placement. That was my thought.
Okay.
So the final, the crazy game that was.
Madness.
Absolutely crazy. Or at least, a couple of sets were. So here's my hot take, and you can shoot me down for it if you think.
Can't wait. Go on.
I still think Austria are the best women's team in Europe. And I say that because I think in this game, England were incredibly good. But I just feel like Austria's teamwork let them down on the day. And I think England played incredibly well on the day. Don't get me wrong. I think their tactics were perfect. They really singled out certain players to leave them into last. And really made sure that there was a hell of a hole to try and climb out on. But I think a lot of the mistakes that Austria made were self-made at times, and they really dug themselves into some holes. Especially that set where Alice absolutely went on fire with her catching.
That never should have happened.
That is
never
Austria should never allow that to have happened. Incredible that Alice
amazing from
made
Alice.
it absolutely insane. That ability to do that.
That she'll hold on to that moment for the rest of her fucking life. She'll be
100%.
Showing grandchildren that shit. It was incredible. It was incredible, but it never should have happened. It never should have happened.
It made Austria
it showed Austria's weakness, right? It's Austria have this mindset of we kill every set, or go bombard them, and 99% of the time it has worked a dream. And I think England, although in that one instance, right, it is an individual moment of magic, but if you look at it back, even if they make the hit on Alice, they're immediately out anyway. Yeah. And all they've done is just they're continually sacrifice players for it. They need to learn when to just kill a game or kill a play, right? Yeah. Just reset. Take them with ball possession and go back at them. What England did was they allowed them to be aggressive and punish them for it, whereas most other teams don't do that. The survivability from England in that game was incredible. Alice in particular, and Abby as well. They did this both women's and mixed. Just survived pretty much everything. It was really good to watch, and that is something England women lacked previously in the games against Austria, was that they were going out to easy singles. They were trying to pick up catches where they weren't needed, and they were getting punished for it. This time they were like, right, okay, we will take ball possession and we'll catch them out, and I mean, get them up court, whatever. and they played a much smarter game and punished that aggressive style of play, which is something that whenever we were talking about in the preview, I said if they kind of play the way that Derby can play, but with the better individual players, this could work, and it did. They punished that overly aggressive play, and all else you have to do now, if to take it back, is learn when to just go. No, we'll back off. We'll take our ball possession. We'll go back at them with the singles that we know work really, really well.
Yeah, I think you could see that Derby play style come through especially on some sets where some of the ball placement were when it was like one person left and you were seeing, balls going into the back of the net. And I mean, yeah, the borderline invalids from both teams were quite impressive.
Throughout the entire tournament, throughout
the tournament, yeah, it was.
It's obviously I'm watching from the live stream, so like it's a bit difficult to tell the valids and invalids. But there's a few of them that are just sitting there going, and you can see like a few of the referees go,
yeah.
There was definitely some borderline ones I thought were a bit scary that they were allowed. To be fair, they were fairly consistent with it, at least. But yeah, it was definitely a bit dodgy.
I think there was a moment while, because I was doing photography on that game, there were quite a lot of us doing photography on that game. The finals in general, we were swarming. Everyone was everywhere.
They just wanted like courtside seats, didn't they?
Obviously, like England as well, being in the final means they've got their own media team there as well. So there were just so many people that were swarming around. I can't remember for the life of me who it was that I was talking to on the court side while doing the photos, but just very early on in the match, whoever it was just turned to me and was like, "Do Austria look scared to you?" And I looked over at them and looked at them doing their lineup, and I was like, "Yeah." And I don't think I've ever seen that in their face. I don't think I've ever seen some of those players have the exact facial expression they had in that moment, where I was just like, "Oh my god, you are actually capable of being nervous." Like, fucking hell, I've never seen you guys look shaken. And it wasn't late on in the game, it was relatively early. And I was just like, that's not normal for Austria. Something's gone wrong in their heads. And I think that's, like, I don't necessarily agree with you, Nick, in the sense of, like, Austria is still the best team, because, like, ultimately, well, they didn't win Euros, did they?
I get his point.
I get your point. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I think the extent that I would agree to it with is that I don't think that was... I don't think it was like the best that England could play against the best that Austria could play and England coming out on top. I think it was England playing incredibly, incredibly well and Austria getting very shaken uncharacteristically. And because it's so out of character, they just seem to not know how to deal with it, which, again, we've never really seen Austria not know how to deal with something. Normally they just rotate through every different tactic they've got and eventually they fall on one that works and they stick with that. Whereas here, they just kind of... It felt like they were slow to adapt their game, which is completely the opposite to what Austria normally do. And when they did adapt it, it just didn't work. And then they would get stuck in that style for a bit too long. And it just kind of... They played very well, but it felt uncharacteristic for Austria. And fair play to them for keeping it such a close game despite that.
Yeah, 100%.
Austria looked nervous. England did not look nervous throughout that entire game. Even near the end, they didn't look that nervous on the sidelines, I would say.
I would very much agree with that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think watching Austria through the groups as well, they had a much heavier rotation of their players than England did. And I think that's what probably had the influence on the nerves. And I think, we were talking about this before in the previews episode, sorry, but what's going to be Austria? That was the question. And, you settled on, and I think we all settled on time. And I think what Austria are currently trying to do is fight that battle with time by getting those rotation with the players in now in the group stages, and then still have the elite level players that they do to go through the quarterfinals, the semi-finals, and hope that's enough to blood them to get them ready for a final against England. And I just don't think it was the case this time. They absolutely handled Italy. They absolutely handled Czechia. But then you come against England and you've not really had enough diverse gameplay in those two games to really test you on how you need to play when you come against a squad like England, and you need to get ready. I think England were just more game ready than Austria in this scenario. That's why I say I think as a team, as a squad, I still personally, the hot take is that Austria are better than England, But I think England handled this much better, and I am not taking anything away from the fact that they are champions. They are European champions, and they have fully earned that. And they,
they were the best.
fully deserved. And because, like, I think this is the difference to say between Italy and England and Austria, right? Is that scene with Alice, like, Matt does the analysis on it, where it's like, it's ridiculous that Alice made those catches, but every single one of those catches she made, England hit out the player straight away as soon as they threw. Like, every player was out from being caught and hit. They were out twice, every single one of them. Whereas, like, Italy, you can see they have the ability to do one or the other. But to double down like England did on, if Austria make a mistake like that, where Austria going up and countering, well, that's what they're doing, is they're making sure that they're covering, and they just overcommitted. And England brutally punished like 4 or 5 of their players in like 20 seconds. That's the level that England were playing at, and it was incredible.
I will say I am so excited to see Alex Such's documentary. I think, like, when England didn't win the other like finals or semi-finals, and this was the last chance that he had to not end up throwing out 2 years worth of work, and it finally paid off. I was like, to be fair, you couldn't have asked for a better narrative. This is a perfect ending to that. And when he finishes that project, that's going to be such a great thing to watch back, and just really come to terms with
no pressure, Alex.
Huh?
No pressure on Alex. Like, you've got to deliver now. There are people waiting. I
think he sent me a message the other day that mentioned Oscars in it, so that's I don't think he's feeling the pressure.
The bar low. Yeah, he set the bar low at least.
yeah.
The only
go on.
The one fun thing I want to point out is so us two were messaging during that final, and at the start of it I said they need to get Alice on as soon as possible, because I was like, that is the big thing that they're missing. And then she came on and done that, and I just want to say I called it. I told her she was going to be the game changer.
Yeah, it was an impressive game. Yep,
it was very much so.
Yeah, it's probably one of the best games of dodgeball I've ever seen. That and the mixed final were just fantastic games.
I think all of them were, to be honest, in different ways. Like, even the set like that Northern Ireland England semi-final, like this was a tactical, like a really tactical game. You could see that from the start with the way that England were targeting certain players, the way that Austria wanted to play, and then they fumbled on their own ability at times. It was really down to that tactical play. Whereas, like, and as such, it was quite nervy in a way. Like, no team really got ahead, no team really slipped behind, because they were both making mistakes. They were both tactically able to counter the opposition. And then you've got Northern Ireland that say, right, the first 3 sets, we're just going to 2-ball you all the time, and you're going out. And they just did it. Completely different style of play, but incredible to watch. Like, absolutely incredible. Like, yeah, some of these matches, just honestly, dodgeball-wise, some of the stuff we saw at this Euros was an absolute treat. But yeah, shall we go on to the women's results or placings?
Yes.
There we go. So do we want to start with that 3rd, 4th game?
Oh my god. It was so good. It was so good. It was just, that again, up there with like some of the best games from dodgeball ever, but obviously from this Euros, like that Italy-Sweden game. So like tense, like one of the closest games you could possibly have other than what happened in mixed. But like just Italy versus Sweden, amazing game. It didn't come down to, it wasn't sudden death, was it? It was an overtime set.
Yeah, no, it was it was an overtime set. Yeah, not sudden death of an overtime set. Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
so ridiculously close game, and so good to see a new team up there doing that. Like Italy's always kind of been up there in the sort of top 4 kind of area, and Northern Ireland's normally up there. It's interesting to see Sweden just make that jump up into the sort of top 4 area and really compete for a place on the podium. Massive for them. And like, I don't remember exactly what I said in the preview episode, but I'm pretty sure I wasn't singing Sweden's praises because I didn't necessarily have a particularly high opinion of them. I didn't even predict them to get out of the groups. So, when we say that I'm good at predictions, I'm clearly absolute crap at predictions. But massive kudos to Sweden for that, because it's just that final, not final, third, fourth playoff could have gone either way. And the fact that it could have gone either way is huge for Sweden. That's amazing news for them.
Yeah, it was that the way that ended. It's one for the dodgeball nerds on the why that finale was so tense. I was like, as we were getting ready for the last couple of episodes, I was talking to Colin, I was rewatching it, and he had to deal with me rewatch it about 10 times to understand what the hell had happened. Because it's just it's so crazy. It comes down to a leap of faith attempt by Sweden to hit a retreating Italian player, who then line faults. And from the video, I can't tell whether or not that player gets hit. But as the ball is released and the ball is in the air, the Italian player retreating line faults and is out. And the rules in EDF is that if you hit a player out while doing a leap of faith, then you are still alive, as long as the player is out by the time you land, I believe, right? So you have to hit the player before you land. And it was a case of, was this player out and hit? And that's what they were trying to decide.
Sorry. Just to correct your phrasing there, it's as long as you've released the ball and the ball then goes on to make a successful hit against a player and you hit the ball before you land. So it's not that the ball has to have hit the target before you land, it's that the ball has to have left your hand before you land.
Cool, okay, yeah.
Meant the other thing, which would have been... I mean, we're still talking about fractions of seconds here, but
yes, yeah.
Especially in like the women's game, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of players do land before the ball hits their target.
Yeah, but either way, like those fractions of seconds is exactly what made the referees talk for so long about what on earth happened, and that needed to be a hit, and that suiciding player or the leap of faith player not to be out for Sweden to drag it into a an overtime set, which they did. They did successfully manage to do, and then Italy went on to win that final set. Like, just the drama of it all was incredible. The tension of sitting there waiting for the referees for the decision, not knowing fully what happened, was just, it was really great. Really, really, wow. Kind of speechless kind of game.
In some ways, it's good that Italy went on to win the overtime set, because I think if they hadn't, then that would have put a lot more pressure on that refereeing decision. And that's, I would say, pretty controversial refereeing decision, because it's not entirely clear, but ultimately, like, referees sometimes get things right, sometimes get things wrong, and you have to go with what they say on the day. But when it comes down to something like that, where it's such an important game and it's genuinely like a medal qualifying match, then like it puts a lot of pressure on that decision to be the right decision. So the fact that Italy won regardless of it is good in that context. But yeah, it's a very, very close game, and I mean, already, like, Sweden getting a player out from a leap of faith, I find it amazing whenever you don't see leap of faith that much in the women's game. It's not as common. So to have that happen is actually kind of incredible in itself. And kudos to Sweden. If they can really get that down, that's a terrifying quality to have as a team, because, like, you don't really see England and Austria doing leaps of faith.
No. I mean, yeah, the fact that it happened in 2 Sweden knockout games as well, and that's what decided what happened in the outcome of that game is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, I do appreciate the point about the refereeing thing, because it's tough being a referee, and when you feel like you try and make as many correct, accurate decisions as you can during the matches, and this is probably one of the only times I've ever seen a game where if you were one of the teams that were on the receiving end of that and things didn't work out, you can't go back and go, well, if we'd done this, if we'd done that in earlier sets, because this game was so back and forth. And yeah, if they'd won other sets, then they would have won dominantly. But this was, 2 teams very much at each other's level, really playing against each other. And if a decision like that would have made not a difference to the outcome, but just, felt like, Italy potentially let themselves down because of that refereeing decision, then that would have been really tough. But just incredible game. Definitely want to go watch. I mean, you should be having quite a long shopping list if you're listening to this of all the games you need to go watch now. Go hit that subscribe button on the EDF channel, because That's the European Dodgeball Federation channel, by the way, if you didn't know what EDF stands for. But yeah, go give that a subscribe, because there are many games you're going to want to go watch.
Right, because there's a YouTube page that actually exists now, as opposed to the first 2 weeks after Euro.
Yeah, and there are also some really good podcasts on there as well, where there's interviews some players. Especially, we interviewed 2 players, one from Sweden, one from Italy, and we discussed this game in quite a bit of detail, and the other games that were going on, and just how those players, the teams, felt in those scenarios and managed the situation of staying that close in all those games, like Italy having such a close quarterfinal, Sweden having such a close quarterfinal, and then to regather after quite a harsh semi-final, to then have to play each other. That takes a lot. And it was really interesting to hear from them about what they were saying about what their coaches were doing and their advice on the day. But yeah, back to the Catching Out podcast. Any other games that or playoffs that you really want to discuss? Because I feel like the one for me was France being down at 9 and 10th. I know we saw, it's kind of like a bit of a tough one for France. They came as well as they could, considering they didn't get into the quarterfinals, which is a bit tough. It feels so weird. I keep forgetting when I look at these that the band from 8th to below is because people haven't made the quarterfinals, and that cutoff is such a brutal cutoff.
Yeah, I think that's what I was saying before, where it's that tricky thing where that 4th to 13th place grouping, I would say, sorry, Ireland, feels really harsh. I have to put the number somewhere, but the 4th to 13th area, I wouldn't necessarily say like Scotland versus Sweden that you'd put money on Scotland winning that match, but I wouldn't necessarily put money on Sweden winning the match. I think it sort of becomes a lot less predictable than if you're looking at the top 3 or even the top 2 against anyone in that midfield. And it's a very expansive midfield. Like normally when we talk about midfields in leagues and stuff, then it's sort of like, oh, you've got your top 4, and then you've got your midfield of about 6 teams, and then you've got your lower level teams. It's like, no, this is most of the table is within arm's reach of each other. Like Hungary, if we'd seen Hungary play against Northern Ireland, what would we have seen? Like, there's so many interesting matchups that could have happened within that set that don't really look like they could be close based on the numerical value that we've given to each team, but actually could have been incredibly close. So yeah, it's maybe 4th to 11th. I don't know. It's tricky.
I would say 4th to 11th. That's where I draw the line personally.
Definitely incredibly close.
Yeah.
Scotland
I could see Hungary beating Sweden, and I could see beating Hungary. I don't see Scotland beating Sweden.
Not with how they played.
No. But
yeah,
I do also want to point out that Ireland were 12-0 up against the 3rd place team. Like,
yeah.
I do also want to point out
a bit of credit.
I do also want to point out they drew that game.
Yeah. So
they drew with 3rd place. There's a lot of teams that didn't draw against Italy, mate.
That is fair.
Categorically, nobody else drew against Italy.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I'll take that point.
It's a really tough midfield area where it's very, very close, and that's good. That's what you want to see for the development of the sport, is that the sort of big area there where anyone can beat anyone. Ideally, you'd want to eventually get to the point where those teams are then progressing up and getting into the top section, or just sort of merging the midfield into the top, and then you've got anyone could win it, which would be lovely as a situation. But the fact that you've got so many teams there that are all competing at a very high level, but with very different styles of dodgeball, is really, really nice to see. It makes it a very interesting tournament. You don't want a tournament that you can predict easily. The ideal is that, at some point, 2-3 years from now, if you tried to sit down and do a podcast like us idiots are trying to do, and you made predictions, you should be like 50% correct. It should be just pure chance whether or not you get it correct, because that's the ideal, that it really cannot be predicted and it's anyone's game, and that would be really exciting.
Yeah, on the predictions, we're
not much better than, are we?
I mean, so Colin on 60% accuracy for Colin, 66% accuracy for Zoe, and I'm on 80%.
Yeah.
You accidentally got Sweden right.
I was going to say, if we'd done like each individual match, it would have been very different.
Yeah, I mean yeah, we know in total that myself and Zoe we were on 64% and Zoe on Colin you were on 57. Like we were a bit better than a coin flip.
Yeah, really
Which
not
you know,
great.
which yeah, like it's
No need for me to catch strays here, Nick.
You're not catching strays. You're on this podcast. I am addressing you. You're a shit predictor.
All right, you do okay one time, and you think that you're a great predictor. Jesus Christ!
I love you, buddy. Don't hate me.
You were miles behind me and Zoe for the entirety of British Dodgeball League. So
oh yeah,
go suck a lemon.
Oh, it's bitter. Okay.
Well, the Swiss team, we had our own predictions chart, which I did completely different predictions to what I did on this one because
Love that.
It was done like a month later. We had a lot more information.
Oh, yeah, true. Actually, that's fair. I'll give you that one.
I didn't do particularly well on that one either. I think.
Yeah, let's not record the podcast next time 2 months in advance.
I did better.
Yeah,
than that
definitely bit us in the ass.
I did better than that predictions than I did in this. But if you compare my prediction quality to other people on the Swiss team, I think I didn't do particularly well. I wasn't like the best. I was somewhere 5th or 6th.
Fair,
so there's someone else out there that you should bring onto the podcast. I don't know who it is, but it's not me.
Right, so we're now hiring for new substitute co-host.
Emily Walker. Emily Walker.
The real one.
She knows. She knows she's always welcome on this podcast. If she ever wants to voice an opinion, she has a seat at this table.
I think it's part of the reason why she won't come on. She knows how keen we are.
But yeah, back to women's Euros. One question I do have, I'd love to know is how the Netherlands feel about finishing 8th, because they were so close to Sweden in that game. To then sort of how that sort of fell apart. I genuinely think it's down to pure exhaustion. They were absolutely shattered with over half their team playing in mixed as well. And you could see, I'm pretty sure after their Northern Ireland game, they went straight onto a mixed game against Wales, which is, again, not easy. So I reckon they were absolutely shattered, and I think they just need to balance out their team a bit better.
Yeah, but I also look at that, and I do think Czechia, Northern Ireland, and Wales were better squads than them, though. I'll be honest.
Looking at that, I'm like, the people beneath them aren't worse than them drastically either. I wouldn't predict to lose against the Netherlands. I wouldn't predict Switzerland to lose against that. We've always lost by exactly one set against the Netherlands. If we'd played this Euros, I wouldn't have doubted that it would be a similar story. Like, it would be one of us wins by a single set. Like, that's what we were just saying. All the teams are really close. It kind of feels gutting to see some of them placed lower than they did in previous years, but someone has to place somewhere. And ultimately, if all the teams are kind of the same ability between 4th and 11th, then that means someone ends up being 11th, and it feels hard done by because they actually played fantastically well against a team much higher. And like Colm said, Ireland finished 14th and drew against 3rd place. Like, you could point to a lot of the different positions on that table and say, "Ooh, does it feel a little bit unfair? How did those teams feel about it?"
Yeah. I guess the thing is the point more was Wales. No, because the same thing can be said for Wales, right? Like, Wales lost to Italy by the finest of margins and still come 7th. Like, they lose, like, straight after that sort of a close game. They got battered by Czechia. 19-9 was the final score there. So, I mean, they did go on to then do exactly the same to the Netherlands, but Netherlands made it very close against Northern Ireland, only 2 sets behind. But I think there is an interesting thing to look into in terms of how do you bounce back from a quarter-final to know you've still got 2 placement games left. Like, it's no one else has that. Like other if you've won in the quarter-final, fantastic. You've got top 4. That's a really great achievement. If you lose, you've got to fight for 5th through 8th. And the difference between finishing 5th and the difference between finishing 8th is quite significant on that final standings. Like, yeah, it is quite a drop off. So to try and get that mentality back to bring it back, like, Northern Ireland and Czechia couldn't do much against England and Austria. But Netherlands and Wales were really in it, and they couldn't then perform afterwards.
The only team that I think would quite a bit feeling disappointed for me would be Czechia, because I think they definitely should have been beating Sweden and coming top of that group. In all honesty, I think they showed it in pretty much every other game what they had in their locker, and I don't know what it was in that Sweden game that they just didn't show it as well. Because like you said, like Czechia battered Northern Ireland. I watched a bit of the game. I didn't watch the entirety of it, but I kind of sat there and went, I would love to have seen this in a bit more in the Sweden game, because I think it definitely showed more of what they had. So he definitely wanted to jump in there and disagree.
Well, first of all, they played against Wales. But yeah.
Sorry, that's what I meant. My bad.
Oh,
No, it's the fifth, sixth playoff game.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
man.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. I thought you were talking about the before that.
I see where you're coming from. I do think Czechia is really good, but equally, having played both of those teams this year, I fully see why Sweden ranked higher than Czechia. I think Sweden played incredibly fluid dodgeball a lot of the time, and were a very unified team by the time after that Croatia game. I don't know what happened in that Croatia game, and that really set everyone else's heads spinning. But like after that point, they just seemed to kind of work a lot better as a unit. Whereas Czechia sometimes did and sometimes didn't. Sometimes they played really neat dodgeball, and you're absolutely right to praise them on that. They played some of the most beautiful, good dodgeball. But equally, there were moments like when we were playing them where I was just sort of like, it's beautiful dodgeball, but it's not surprising. There's nothing that they were doing that was sort of hard to predict. And so if you could read them, if you had a good enough team that could, I think anyone could have read Czechia, but if you had a team that was good enough to be able to capitalize on what you just read instead of just languishing in it, then it was probably a really good, really easy match to, not easy match to win, but an easier match to win. Whereas Sweden, it felt quite hard to read what they were doing at times, and they felt like they were kind of shifting between phases of games a lot better. So I don't necessarily think Czechia deserved to win that game, and I don't think they necessarily deserved to win it.
Deserves the wrong word, but I definitely would have, in a similar vein to Nick with Austria and England, I would have said Czechia were the better team than Sweden overall. My opinion, anyway.
Yeah, that's fair. I think, it's really hard to say. I think it's a really good table.
We're just going to have another competition to sort it out, aren't we?
I think it'll be interesting.
Oh, Nick can organise it.
Catching out sponsored open coming soon.
Sponsored? No.
Sponsored by
Vito.
by the fact that none of us have any money. The one thing I did want to sort of say before we close out on this, Belgium have some real highlights to take away. I think in that three-way against Norway and Spain, they did really well. In those games, they looked definitely the strongest team of the bunch. They had some real bright sparks on those teams. I can't remember a name. I want to say it's Cuvelier. I could be saying it wrong.
Yeah.
Awesome. She played fantastically, both catching and just covering her entire team. Like, she played so well. So yeah, like, it was really good because I was there doing the video for the Belgium-Spain game, while the Wales-Italy game was on the other court, and it's just, it really highlighted to me that Belgium, far more organised outfit, looking a lot better, and it's crazy that they're only 2 positions behind Scotland. There's still a way to go to being able to beat Scotland, I think, but they are definitely really on the right tracks and definitely have the talent there. So really excited to see where Belgium go in the next few years. I definitely expect them to be climbing that board for sure.
Yeah, I think Belgium are just such an interesting team in general. I've always found that such a unique setup they've got over there, and so I think it's it will be interesting to see if they can get to the point where they sort of start playing a very team-based game. I think they just... Yeah, I think they can be one of those teams that gradually progresses. The tricky thing is everybody's gradually progressing at the moment, and it's what I said Scotland have found tricky, is that Scotland haven't progressed in the same way that other people have. They have progressed, but they haven't progressed as much. And I think Belgium will continue to progress at least at the same pace as everyone else. but to climb higher in the table, they have to progress faster than everyone else, and that would be the tricky thing for them, is can they actually get that little leg up where they start getting better quicker than other people. And I don't really know how you do that, because that's the same problem that Switzerland's had. Switzerland somehow, we've managed to climb from 12th to 10th, but it's not like a gigantic leap. The big leap is to make it from 10th to 8th, to stop being the best of the losers and start being the worst of the winners. So I think it's interesting to see how people kind of adapt, and while everyone will progress in the space of time that we've got now between this and World Champs, and also between this and the Irish Euros in 2 years' time, like ultimately you just have to progress better than everyone else. It's not a matter of progressing; it's a matter of being sort of progressing.
I think it's difficult as well though, because it's national systems that are being set up. It's a voluntary sport. There are only so many times we can come together to play other international teams. There are going to have to be Euros where we see teams rebuild, where new players are coming in, old players are coming out, whether they're going into coaching or whatever. And because of the nature of lots of teams being at different levels and abilities, I would say Scotland are in a rebuilding phase at the moment. I think that's what we saw. They were in a position where a few people had stepped away, new players were coming in, the coaching was still there, the experience was still there. Don't get me wrong, they've all got all that experience, but because of they're having to rebuild and how brutal that mid-table is, it makes a huge difference to your standings in the end. So to go from 12th to 10th is a big win. Like don't deny yourself that, because everyone has to.
Being more teams as well. That's the other thing to consider. It's not just that you've come 10th from the top; it's that you've come more spaces from the bottom than you did previously.
Yeah, no, it's really So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out at Worlds. We've now got 17 positions in which somehow the rest of the world have to fit into. Some are going to be tumbling, and some people might go up because they might find themselves buoyed by wins elsewhere. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how different teams come along, and especially from what we've heard of certain nations really enjoying cloth because of the type of ball game it is compared to foam. It'll be really interesting to see how that sticks, and which nations really come out swinging and really fight for that top three, and other nations that maybe would be a bit more relaxed. Yeah. On that note, we'll round up this episode. Thank you again for listening on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Please give us a like and a subscribe. We're so close to 200 subscribers. We'd really love to pass that milestone. All your support is appreciated. Please let us know any of your thoughts. Leave a comment. Message us if you've got anything that you want us to be aware of, whether it's international dodgeball, local dodgeball, whatever's going on. If it's dodgeball in general, we're all excited about it. So let us know. And see you in the next episode. There are 3 others to watch on Euros. How mad's that?
Way too many.
Well, there's 3 from us. There's another 4 out there as well. You got 8 episodes of dodgeball Euros dodgeball content to listen to.
I'll tide you over Christmas.
And as we are recording this in December now, Merry Christmas! Enjoy.
Merry Christmas.
Oh God, yeah.
All right. Until next time.
Bye.